Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live guest interview within the Mindful Journey. Thank you so much for being here today. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat function, and we will hope to get to them on the back end of the conversation. I'm so excited to have our guest here today, Dr. Samira Beckwith. Samira and I met maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, and I was not only impressed by the business expertise and leadership wisdoms that she had shared with me, but just the humility and compassion with which she carried herself. So I know that we're all going to learn so much from her many years of experience and her role, which she's currently the president and CEO of Hope Healthcare, headquartered in Fort Myers, Florida, I believe since 1990, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Samira?
I've been here since 1990, and our organization has actually been here for 40 years.
Wonderful. Wow. So health, what was interesting to me as I dug in to learn even a little bit more is that obviously you started as a hospice organization serving, I think, roughly 100 patients to now a comprehensive healthcare system serving more than 4,000 patients a day. So that was certainly intriguing. We'll learn more about that. But so beyond that, Samira has been a dedicated champion for palliative care and end-of-life issues. She has served as the chair for both the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization and the National Hospice Foundation. She's been recognized nationally and throughout the state of Florida for her commitment to providing quality care. She'd previously been appointed to the conference, I think it was the White House Conference on Aging, and had also been appointed by the prior Florida Governor Rick Scott to the board of directors for the Florida Center for Nursing, and certainly has received a number of other accolades and awards, not the least of which was receiving the Ellis Island Medal of Honor, which is bestowed upon distinguished Americans who exemplify outstanding qualities in our world for their personal and professional contributions. So with all that being said, again, Samira, thank you so much for being here and looking forward to your expertise and wisdom.
Well, thank you so much. I'm pleased to be here. And thank you for that introduction and the review of so many wonderful opportunities that I've had. I really feel very privileged to serve in the roles that I do and the roles that I've had in the past. So thank you.
Yes, my pleasure. Thank you. Well, could you help us understand, for those who may not be in the Southwest Florida area, and even for those who may be, who are tuning in, who aren't familiar with Hope Healthcare, what is Hope Healthcare? And like a high level overview, what do you all do on a day-to-day?
Yeah. We have a number of programs and services that are all coordinated and provided to care for people of all ages, different illnesses, people who are in a final chapter of life. They're experiencing a serious illness, and maybe it's not a final chapter of life, but they need palliative care, which is really to control pain and symptoms. And I guess if I had to sum it up in one sentence, I would say that all of our programs and our services focus on quality of life for people with serious or advancing illness.
Gotcha. Now, so palliative care is something that, I'm obviously I'm not immersed in your world, so I don't know the distinct differences, but I assume there's something different between palliative care and hospice. And if so, what is that difference? What distinguishes the two?
Well, it is a very important question because there's a lot of confusion that people have about what is palliative care, what is hospice. All of hospice care is palliative care because we are really focusing on providing comfort and quality of life and helping people to do what they can do during this very difficult yet important time of their lives. It could be days or weeks or months or maybe even years. And in palliative care, someone could need palliative care who is not on a trajectory of their illness where they're having an acute episode and they need some additional expertise in pain relief or symptom management to help them during that acute episode. So not all palliative care would lead to hospice care, but all hospice care is also focused on palliative care. I think the main point for people to remember, instead of trying to remember those definitions, is that there's no reason for people to suffer. And
Mm,
if they have a serious illness and there's a chance that it could lead to the need for hospice care, ask for palliative care in addition to the other interventions that they have going on.
mm.
Because sometimes people are suffering needlessly.
Yes, yes. That's great insight, and thank you. Obviously, again, I not being immersed in this world, and fortunately not having to experience this with any loved ones or family members. I never had any real understanding between the differentiation. So that certainly was good clarity for me personally too. Now, Samira, I know you obviously have not been in the trenches, so to speak, serving the patients because you're obviously running the operation, but I trust you certainly interacted with so many patients throughout the years, and I'm sure you've heard so many stories from your staff through the years. And I'd love to know, what are, from your experiences, from that vantage point, what are maybe one or two regrets you may hear from patients as they're nearing they're nearing the inevitable? Um, and yeah, well, let me just stop there. What maybe one or two regrets that you've heard that are recurring?
Well, that is certainly stories that I've heard over the years from people. And oftentimes, what I hear from people is a regret that they, one, didn't have the opportunity to be cared for by hospice earlier
Mm,
because they were referred maybe in the last days or weeks, maybe even the last month of life. And it was quite evident to their healthcare professional, to their physician, to their care team that they couldn't be cured of their illness. And so they regret being referred so late. And I want to explain why. Because when we're caring for people under the hospice portion of care, our focus is asking them what matters to them most, what do they want to accomplish with the time that they have remaining, and we really help to focus on that. People think it's just maybe the last few days of life, and we're giving them medication. When people know that they're nearing the end of their journey, they want to maybe write letters to their family members. They
mm,
want to make amends. Maybe they want to say, I love you to certain people. When say, I'm sorry to
mm,
other people. Maybe there's a trip that they want to take. There's something that they have been holding off
mm.
accomplishing because they didn't realize that they were in this phase of life. And so, that speaks a little bit to the kind of regrets that people have. They think that they are going to have time later to make that reconnection or have that conversation or
Mm,
get around to doing something that they thought that they would have time to do. So
sure.
that's probably the biggest regret that I hear from people. Why didn't I do this earlier? Why
Mm,
didn't I accomplish this earlier? So we try to help people focus on the time they have remaining so they can at least accomplish some of those
yes,
goals.
yes. Wow, that is deep and certainly quite profound. How has that impacted you as a person? What lessons have you gleaned in being able to have that front row seat, if you will, from so much fragility and just the human side of life?
I wish I could say that I always get things accomplished and always say what I want to say and do what I need to do. But I'm human too, and I get caught up in, I'll get to that later or I'll do that eventually. However, I do try to be in the moment.
Mm,
And I think that's something that people forget, to live the moments that we do have and the moments that we're in. And, an example of that, someone asked me recently, why aren't you more stressed? And actually, I don't want people to think that I don't get stressed because I do. At the same time, we can only accomplish what we can accomplish at the time.
mm,
So I'll work on something, then move on to the next project or meeting, next activity, because stress doesn't really, it can help us in some situations and it can hurt us in others.
Yes.
So I try to be mindful that your topic,
Yes.
being mindful is very, very important. And living in the moment, planning for tomorrow, but always looking at being grateful for what we do have
Yeah.
and reaching out and in some ways trying to plan so that we can accomplish as much as possible.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Yeah, thank you for bringing mindfulness up. Obviously, we talk about it a lot within the mindful journey and, of course, mental health as well. But we're living in this time where we're all facing increasing demands. And even if we don't deem our jobs are overly stressful, we're facing inevitable stress in other parts of our life because we have devices and technologies and things that are always striving to get our attention. And it's just so hard to disconnect now. So I'd love to know somebody like you who's running a large organization. Obviously, you've probably got financials on your mind all the time. Human resource type of things and personnel challenges, et cetera, et cetera. Or do you have any coping mechanisms that you've relied on in your own life to help you recalibrate, to help you be more present, to help you be more mindful?
I I do, and they're not perfect. However, I'm always trying to be smarter tomorrow than I was today,
Mm.
and to learn something from every single interaction that I have, as well as every single day. And I think that's really what keeps me fortified, is the fact that I try to pace myself and to learn every day and to respond. I still want to be responsive for people and yet at the same time set some boundaries,
Yes.
boundaries with myself, in that, I try to respond to every email at least every day and say, at least, I can't talk to you today, but I'm acknowledging that I'm in receipt of your message
Yes.
and, I'll get back to you. And I think some people think they have to do everything right away.
Mm.
And I think that adds to the stress. And at the same time, you have to prioritize.
Mm.
And so it's somewhere between being responsive, setting boundaries, and understanding priorities.
Yes. Well, that's great insight. And I can speak from personal experience because we've corresponded a number of times throughout the years. And you've always been so gracious with your time with me. And I'm grateful for that. And you've definitely practiced what it is that you just preached here because I've got, one sentence emails back saying, Adam, I've got your note, we'll re-engage later. And so I think that's a nice strategy because, again, email is something that everyone is overwhelmed with, I'm sure, no matter what your job is. And rather than feeling as though you have to solve every problem in that moment, just recognizing the person in their time and appreciating them, et cetera, can buy you some time before you actually solve their problem, if it is a problem in the email.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And it's either, and as you said, maybe it's not solving the problem, but it is acknowledging that, I do want to interact with you. So the other thing I do, there are times where, it's not a fit for our organization or a
Mhm.
fit for me at this point in time. And so I believe it's also important to acknowledge that for people.
Yes.
I talked to someone who was trying to get our business about, I don't know, remember what it was now. And I just said to him, right now we're not going to make a change.
Yeah.
And so, although I think you have a great product or, something along that line,
Sure.
and, you're a good person. These aren't the exact words, but the nuance. And if we're in a position later where it may be helpful, I'll be back in touch. He wrote me this nice note. It was kind of like, thank you so much for just acknowledging it and saying no in such a nice way. So
Yeah.
I don't keep bothering you, or I don't keep thinking about the fact that you haven't answered. There's a lot of people who don't answer. And then you wonder if they ever got the message. So I don't know. There's some kind of balance between, again, the boundary, the response, uh, taking the pressure off of yourself and off of other people.
Yes. No, that, and I spoke to that in the brief introduction and just about that. I felt that from you the first time we interacted, that compassion. And I think it's somewhat lost in our world today, sadly, wherein we dehumanize experiences. And last month, or actually earlier this month, we had another guest, Dr. Anna Lemke, who's a Stanford psychiatrist and has written a book called Dopamine Nation. Quite busy, probably has national obligations always. And one of the things that I was most intrigued by that she said is that she perceives her patients and those that she's interacting with, everyone has equal value in their time, if you will. And I love that, because we were talking about showing up late to events and showing up late to places. And basically what she was saying is, when you show up late, you're telling that person that your time is more valuable than theirs. And what I'm hearing from you as it relates to this email, when you get even a cold outreach from a potential vendor, you're showing them that you value them as a person. And I can tell you from personal experience, as somebody who's always been selling my products and services, that it's nice to get that, because we get beat up all the time. So thank you for being kind to people and sharing that message, because the truth is if we all are more kind to one another more often, I think there's going to be more happiness in our world collectively.
Well, I think you make a very good point, because there's not enough kindness, and if we can be kind and yet have our message delivered or communicate a message, then why not be kind? You see people just rushing around. Their bad mood is just showing in everything that they're doing, and it just builds. And I think we've all had this experience. I think so, where something doesn't go right in the day, and or a day just starts like that, or somewhere along the way, everything is just going wrong. You spill your coffee, this happens, someone doesn't show up. I mean, it's just like one thing after another. And so what I try to do when I'm having that kind of experience or that kind of day is to just stop, take a breath, reset the day for myself, because otherwise it's going to keep going in that direction. And then, it takes less energy to smile than to frown, and less muscles to do that. And I'm going to use your phrase again, and that is mindful journey. Just stop and be mindful of the way that it's not going the way that you want to spend your time or your day. And people maybe don't give enough credit to taking a breath.
Yes.
They're just stopping, taking that breath, that maybe a couple of deep breaths, and just wondering why the day is going like this, and doing what you can to reset it, because we can't control all these other things happening around us, but we can control the way that we're perceiving it, the way that we're responding to it, and what we're going to do next. So that's what I mean about that reset.
That's right. Oh, I love that. That's absolutely great wisdom, great advice. I'm wondering, Samira, when you reset beyond the breath, do you do any journaling? Do you journal throughout the day?
I don't. I've tried.
Okay.
I've tried to be a journaler. I've just not been able to for some reason, to do it.
Okay.
I've started a number of times, and I don't know, it hasn't been me, but I do know a number of people who have great benefit, find great benefit in that. In fact, I have a longtime colleague. I asked him a question one day about, where was it that something happened? He said, let me go back and check my journal. He journals every day.
Yes.
And it has provided for him great balance and that opportunity to reset. So I would recommend it as a possibility for people to try, if that helps with that reset. And it also helps, I've recommended it to people over the years also, to be able to express their emotions and, not have to have it build up. So it's a wonderful technique for people.
Yeah, no, that I agree wholeheartedly. And the reason I asked is because based on what you were saying with the reset, you struck me as somebody who was probably very introspective and reflective. And I know you can get that in other ways beyond journaling, but I started journaling when I was in college. A professor of mine had asked me, and she and I have grown a great friendship and are still friends to this day, but she asked me one day, about an experience, and I didn't have, I wasn't able to recount it or recall it with real vivid detail. And she said something to me that has stuck with me forever. It was, I thought, quite profound. She said, Adam, you can never recapture the emotion of a moment outside of that moment. And she said, as much as you go back 5 years and think that you remember how you felt, you won't remember the small details that contributed to why you felt what you felt. So for me, much like, the gentleman, your colleague that you mentioned, journaling has given me that opportunity to look back, and recall things that I otherwise wouldn't have recalled. So I appreciate you talking about that here today, because I think it's a message that will never get lost for those who are here with us. Now, Samira, with the end of life situations, not so much from the patient side, but the caregiver side, what would you recommend to somebody? Maybe there's someone listening today, or at some point we'll all probably get to a place where we have to be a caregiver. What do you recommend to folks to help them cope as they're providing that care, or having to make the decision to put a family member in hospice care?
It is a very difficult time. And I've always said to people, it's difficult for the person who is experiencing the serious illness or the final chapter of life. And it's also very difficult for the family member, for the caregiver, for the good friend, depending on who the caregiver is, because there are people who their caregiver might be a longtime friend, or a daughter, a son, or a spouse. And so it varies for different people. And your recognition of that is so very important. And I believe it's important for people to recognize the difficultness of the situation. Otherwise, I think they feel overwhelmed by it, and they feel as though they're never doing enough. So I love the word, be mindful of the situation that they're in, and then to allow others to be helpful, to seek out the right, appropriate help that they need to be a caregiver. There are so many resources, and to allow people to bring those resources forward and to access those resources, and not think that they have to do everything themselves. One of the most important, analogies I would use is, when you're on a plane and they're giving that long spiel at the beginning, and they say, if the oxygen mask drops down, make sure you put it on yourself first before you help somebody who's with you. So that is the analogy that I like to use, because you'll have to take care of yourself in order to take care of your loved one. And so getting those resources for yourself, making sure that you find ways to get your sleep, ways to know what to do. There's caregiver classes. Allow others to be helpful. People sometimes fight allowing the help to come in, whether it be a home health agency, a hospice, a palliative care program, any other kind of help, a book on caregiving. So sometimes people say to us in hospice, I've had people say this to me directly, is I didn't know that I wasn't doing it the easiest way possible. So I was struggling and using a lot more energy than needed. For example, how you move somebody who is seriously ill. There's ways to do that we can teach.
Yeah.
And so the person doesn't get as drained themselves. Or to pull someone up in the bed. They're trying to do it with bare hands and strength. Well, you know what? We use a draw sheet. So we have a sheet under the bed, under the person, and you use that to pull up the person. And so it doesn't require the same kind of energy, which then doesn't drain the person in the same way. So oftentimes, by the time we have somebody under one of our programs or services, they have already depleted so much of their energy. So this is what I'm going to say, get help earlier for the caregiver as well as for the person.
That's another powerful piece of wisdom there, Samira. Definitely. What I'm hearing from you is really being, we've got to take care of ourselves. And I think that translates to all of life, wherein, we have to really do things to help us take care of our well-being and our mind, etc. With your staff, now that's obviously a different segment because they're maybe not as emotionally attached to the family member who's seeing their loved one in this final phase of life. But with your staff, how have you been able to help them take care of themselves? Because I assume that burnout is probably somewhat prevalent as it relates to seeing something every day that could be potentially viewed as tragic.
Well, it's exactly what you said. How is it viewed? That is what makes the difference. Because our staff and the people who come to work in any one of our programs really are looking at what they can do. And I think that's true for no matter what role anybody has in life, in work, in relationships. It is when we get stuck in being overwhelmed by what we can't do, then that's emotionally draining, and that's what burns us out. Is because that's where we're stuck. We have to look at where we are and what can we do moving forward. This is where I think people really are stressed, is because they're looking backwards. And when you look backwards, I think Jimmy Buffett has a song about that, looking backwards too long.
Oh, he probably does. I'm not too familiar with his work. I've heard all this.
Well, I just love songs and quotes and plays and pull things out of that all the time. But you can't look backwards too long, and you have to look about what's in front of me, and that's what I think really keeps people from being burned out. You can't do anything about yesterday. You can only do something about tomorrow.
Yes. Now, do you feel that your staff, I saw I think it was on your careers page, that as I was just perusing to learn a little bit more about Hope Healthcare, it said that 95% retention you have among staff. I don't know if that's changed, but that's fascinating. And it honestly, I was very surprised because, I would assume in that world, because of the nature of the work, there'd probably be a lot of burnout. And I pose this, I'm trying to frame it the right way to ultimately ask you, how have you been able to keep such high retention rates with your staff, beyond maybe sending that message of, hey, focus forward and don't look at the past? Is there anything specific that has allowed them to continually show up for work in what otherwise could be challenging, I don't want to say challenging time, but just seeing somebody nearing death, I don't think for anyone is easy. And maybe I'm wrong in saying that. I don't know.
Well, I don't think it's easy. And maybe what might help to clarify that is that there is great sadness. Our staff will cry with the person, with the family. We have to remember that it's a greater loss for the family member and for the person who is now losing everything that is important to them. They're losing their life and their connection to today. And so we actually, and I talk to people regularly, we'll cry with them. And we remember, though, that it's their journey. And so we don't want our staff, and I don't believe our staff is disconnected from what's happening to the person. We're there to deliver professional care and services, to be helpful, and yet we really have that feeling of empathy. And I think empathy, not sympathy, or maybe it's both. Maybe I should say not sympathy. It's really both. We sympathize and we empathize, and we bring the professional skills and mindset and perspective that we can to make the road easier for everybody involved. And so it becomes a calling. And there is a phrase, something like, if you find something to do professionally or in your work that you find rewarding, then that is what sustains you. If it's being a builder, if it is any other type of work that you find fulfilling, then that keeps you from being burned out. So now we do have times where people have a personal loss and then they need to take a short leave so that they can process their own loss. And so we give people that space and that time to do that.
Oh, that's
We
great.
also value people and say thank you. And they get a lot of thank yous too from the family members and from the patients who are in our care and services. Now, I use the word patient right then, but usually we think about the person who's in our care. I went over to see a gentleman in one of our care centers because I'd actually gone to his home to talk to him about our services. Somehow, I do that occasionally. Somehow someone called me and I talked to them on the phone and they said, well, would you come out here? Yeah, I will. So
Oh, that's nice.
and I can't do that very often, but I did. And so I met him in the home and then he came into the care center. So I went over to thank him for allowing us to care for him during this very important time for him and for his family. And he said, thank you for the wonderful care. He said, it's really been special. Thank you for the care. But then when I thanked him, he said, you're welcome. And so I looked around his room and there was a special blanket on his bed and people were still enjoying the time that they had with him to say goodbye and to share stories. And then that just warmed my heart so much that I know that happens for our staff every day.
Yes, yes. So they're getting fulfillment by their contributions.
Absolutely.
Oh,
They are. That doesn't, and so we say thank you a lot to them.
that's fantastic. Do you do a lot of internal recognition, or is it the thank yous are more subtle, passing through each other in the office and saying, hey, thanks for what you do, or is it a combination?
A combination,
Okay.
so we try to celebrate the birthdays, the anniversaries. I was talking with one of our staff who is leaving yesterday. She is retiring.
Mhm.
Uh, she, and so, in fact, her husband already moved like a year ago, and she's finally going to retire and go move to where he lives. I said, well, that's interesting. But yeah, she just wasn't ready to leave yet. And then she's going to maybe work for us during the season when she might be back in the Florida area. But when I was talking with her, she said to me, I really loved our all staff meetings. And we used to, before COVID, how there's all this pre-COVID now kind of
Yes,
thing.
yes.
So, usually we would have an all staff meeting and we'd have it twice because we're a 24/7 organization. Not everybody can come to one meeting because somebody has to be on the phones and making visits and taking care of people in our services. So, but she said, I've missed all staff meetings so much. She said, I wanted to, and we Zoomed this goodbye yesterday. She said, I wanted to tell you how much I always enjoyed those
Mm.
because, you know, we get to see you, which I didn't realize was so important to her, but we get to see you, we get to see each other, we hug, we talk, we laugh, we eat, we share. And so I have found it important to have those kind of opportunities for the staff. Now we've had to change the way we do them now because of COVID and for healthcare, we're still masking in our facilities and still masking in our offices when people can't be safely distanced. I know that's changed a lot for most of the world, but we're still under those CDC guidelines.
Mm.
And as soon as we can, we'll go back to those all staff gatherings and
Yeah.
we'll go back to those kind of opportunities. I think that is important for people to have that opportunity to share. Now we've been doing them through Zoom
Mm.
uh, when we can, when we can't be together. So those are the kind of celebrations that we still try to continue. And they are important for people.
Yeah, well, that's so fantastic to hear and not surprising. I mean, community, and that's what one of the things, the initiative within the mindful journey, and we're not getting any real traction in the community forum. And it's probably partly because I've done a poor job of letting people know they can express anonymity. But I think community, and there are other ways to build community beyond interaction, but I think community at its core can help people through their difficulties. And so it's certainly not surprising to me to hear that this staff member valued those moments so much, because that human connection and being able to collaborate with team members and share about experiences can give you that burst when it's needed. So
Well,
that's fantastic.
well, absolutely. And it's that opportunity to also laugh together,
Yes.
and to share together. And I think that we try to do that. Sometimes people think that in, and I'm going to say hospice, but in any of our programs, because people have serious illness, that we don't also share laughter with people.
Mm,
And that's really important. Help them share laughter with each other. And I also want to make one more comment about what you said. I don't think it's that you're not doing a good job at getting people to share in community. It's really hard for people. It's difficult. And so I think though people are starting to go in that direction, sharing in Zoom. Our bereavement groups have been very successful
mm,
on Zoom when people haven't been able to get together. And now we're actually finding that some people want to continue that way and not in person. So it's the
interesting.
world, the world got pushed into the future with COVID. And so I think those communities that you're really on the forefront of forming
Mm.
will pick up traction, and that will be much more important as we move forward.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. That's great insight. And I agree with you. COVID definitely pushed the world more quickly towards where it was already going. So it's good to hear that you're getting a lot of traction with the bereavement groups and folks are sharing. Vulnerability is certainly so important. So, well, Samir, I'd like to, and I was real intrigued, of course, by your personal story when we met years back. And I'd like to talk a little bit beyond the business side, just about one, um, like what's a habit, ritual, or routine that you've relied on in your life to help you perform? And I've got a few other questions for you as it relates to personal, but I'd like to start there. What's, again, just something that you relied on that has helped you perform at a high level throughout the course of your career?
Well, I would say many different factors. It's not just one. One, though, that really stands out and is very important is the fact of having colleagues that I can trust and to share with, a group of people that I can trust in a small group. And to this day, we all formed kind of a support group, helping each other to share information, to share best practices, to share ideas. So it was a safe way to do that. And to this day, we stay in touch, even though some of them have retired. In fact,
Yeah.
I get phone calls from some of them in that group that say, well, aren't you retired yet? Because they've all retired.
Yeah.
Now that I think about it, I'm the only one still working. So I must not be the smartest one in the group. They're smarter than me. But you have to have a small group that you can trust. Maybe it's one person, two people, three people that will give you direct, honest information in a way that you can hear it. Because
Mm,
there's plenty of people out there in the world that will tell you what you're doing wrong, but they would do it in a way that you can't hear it. But
mm.
if there's a few people that you can trust, that's very helpful. And the other would be to have mentors. And some people might call that small group mentors. They might be, they might not. There might be other people that you can go to for different types of information. There are mentors that that will again give you that information in a positive way that you can then hear it and act on it. To know when you're doing well, to know when you can improve something, or if you didn't handle something well, you can talk to them about it and they're not going to be critical in a non-productive way, but they're going to help you process it so that you can think about how I might do this differently in the future.
That's yeah, that is I love how you frame that, because information meant to tear someone down is not helpful. So like you said, I think you mentioned that people will give you all sort, they'll tell you how badly you're doing, but they're going to kind of tell you behind the scenes, and it's not going to be delivered in a way that helps you get better. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. And so, when I try to share with people, even from the different roles that I've had, find a way to deliver that message in a way that's helpful to them. And, I get frustrated like anybody else, and, but I try not to yell because, people can't hear when you're yelling, at them. And so sometimes people think that the louder they yell, the more that they'll be listened to. Like if, you hear somebody who's really upset at the airline counter, I use the airline analogy again, and just yelling at the person behind the counter. Not that I haven't, been so frustrated that maybe my voice got a little bit louder, like, what do you mean?
Really? I could not see that from you.
Oh my God. What do you mean my flight's canceled? It's 11:30 at night. Um, but yelling doesn't usually help get your message across. So I've been trying to deliver messages in a way that people can hear them. And then, and I don't know if you've noticed this, sometimes when people are very upset, and I did spend a couple of years working in community mental health, at a community mental health center, working with people in emergency services. They'd come in extreme distress. And, they're way up here. So the way to bring them down is to talk calmer and to help them to calm down. Let them talk, but then the calmer you talk, then their voice will come down, and then they'll be able to come down, and they'll be able to take that breath and then be in the moment and be able to better express themselves.
That's another piece of great wisdom. I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch this myself, because I love what you're saying about the communication. I love a lot of folks in the community here. I don't know if I shared this with you before, but I referee basketball. So coaches, as you can imagine, are always yelling and very loud. And so, what you're saying about talking softly, I've got to believe would be a way to bring them down, just by nature of hearing the quiet in my voice. So thanks for that good nugget. I'll let you know throughout the season how it goes for me.
Right, because that's a different setting. I watch a lot of sports. I'm a baseball fan, basketball fan, football fan.
Yeah.
I went to the Ohio State University, and you have to come to love college sports, or I don't think you get your degree. But
Right.
but I don't know how well it'll work in those situations. But I'd love to hear about it later.
Yes, I'll circle back in January when we're about halfway through the season.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. Well, Samira, another question I'd like to ask, and this one's a little more personal. I think I might have shared this with you on the front end. One of and this question is the same of every guest that we've had, and I'll just give you the intention behind it before asking the question. I believe that so often in life we compare ourselves to everybody else. We think everybody else has the perfect life and they've got it all together. And I realized that in my own life, as I reflected in moments where I had any internal angst, it was because I was comparing myself to somebody else. And I'd realized that comparison loses its power when you recognize that other people are going through pain, hurt, heartache, heartbreak, etc., just like everybody else. So what I've been really trying to do within the mindful journey, both in these discussions and the other resources we deploy, is to normalize mental health. And not in terms of it being toxic, but in terms of the fact that, again, we all do have stuff going on in our headspace. So one of the ways to do that I found is by bringing more vulnerability, getting people to open up about what it is that they've got going on, and which ultimately leads me into the question. I'd love to hear from you, to your level of comfort, of course, what the most challenging thing that you've gone through in your life has been, and what you recall having done to provide the strength to really get through it.
Well, it's such an important question. And so let me share, and maybe it will be helpful, because you're absolutely right. And especially now with, technology, the Instagram, the Facebook, all of this other instant communication, we see people really posting, or I don't know if it's still called posting, but putting information out there about how great everything is. their great new dress, their great food they're eating, their great friends, what a good time they had. And I think that puts even extra pressure on everyone to think that everybody else is having the perfect life. And what I've come to understand is that nobody has a perfect life. But it maybe somebody does. But
I don't think so.
but if you just listen to the vulnerabilities, that people share. So I think this is an excellent approach to help people to understand that. I think that we all have times where we think that maybe we're not smart enough or doing as well as other people. So I think that comes up regularly. I'm trying to think of something for me that might be helpful to others. Um, and I think everything is kind of like along that line. I just want to do my best and try to be smarter tomorrow than I was today. I think I've said that before, but I think that a lot, and I want to learn from other people because I know that I have so much more to learn and to be better than I was today. I think about it. I was talking to a friend earlier today about something. I said, well, you know what? It's just like running. When I used to run a long time ago, when I was younger, I always wanted to run with somebody who ran better than me because I wanted to try to improve. So I've always tried to figure out ways to improve because I guess maybe I've already realized that there are a lot of people that are a lot better at things than I am. So I've learned that by learning that you can't be perfect.
Mm.
But there are a lot of different challenges in that way. I'm not going to be the best at everything, or maybe not the best at anything, but I'm going to try to be my personal best.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way that I try to deal with this whole idea of the rest of the world is perfect. I don't want to I don't want to make it sound like I'm settling though,
Right.
because sometimes people want to just settle
Right.
for not improving. So there's some kind of balance there between the two.
Yes.
That you don't want to settle, you want to be better, you want to improve where you can. And then also learn what you can't improve about. There's something in that AA poem about, help me know what I can change what I can. I don't know the poem exactly, but something along that line. And that's how I try to live my life and my interactions with people because none of us are perfect.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah, absolutely. None of us are perfect, and that is the truth. And I think, sadly, we strive for perfection in a way that can be debilitating and toxic. And when we fall short, and it's inevitable, we're going to fall short. It can bring harm into our lives in many ways, where people rely on drugs or alcohol, etc. There was an old adage that I heard many years back in an officiating endeavor I was going through, and um, they often said for us to strive for perfection but settle for excellence, because they knew that refereeing a basketball game was an imperfect thing. I mean, it's even if we get the play right, 50% of the people, Ohio State. If I'm repping at Ohio State, which I'm not, I don't work in that league, and obviously got a long way to aspire to get into if I do. But the Ohio State, I'm sure, no matter if I got to play right for Michigan State, they're going to think that I screwed them. So all what you said, it resonates. Samira, do you, and again, it's been a number of years, but I recall you'd shared with me, I think you had battled and defeated cancer at one point, if memory serves me, that kind of inspired you to get into your work. And I don't want to put you in an uncomfortable situation, but I know I found inspiration from that. And I think you've spoken to it publicly before. Would you feel comfortable sharing about that experience and maybe how you use that pain to turn it into your life's work?
Oh, absolutely. And I appreciate the question because it is the fact that bad things happen every day to good people, and bad things are going to happen. What do we do when that bad thing happens? And cancer, most people are going to think that's bad. And when I was in my 20s in graduate school, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease. And that was many years ago when it was not very treatable. In fact, the chemotherapy that I received at the time, they don't even give it anymore because it's so toxic.
Mm.
And but I'm very lucky. So because I made it. So I had the chemotherapy, the multiple surgeries, the radiation, which was very, very difficult. I was in the hospital for months at a time, and I really almost died a couple of times because it was so toxic and they couldn't get all the cancer. But so I went through that experience, and I thought, this is an example of how to take a lemon, a bad thing. And I was in graduate school, and I thought, I was hearing about this idea called hospice. It was starting in this country. I just read the book on death and dying by Kubler-Ross.
Mm.
And instead of maybe moving in the direction I was moving in at the time, I decided I wanted to find out more about this. And I wanted to see if I could be helpful to other people in counseling, in how to respond, in setting up the hospice care in this country. Because this was in the 70s that this happened to me. Now people will figure out my age, but I'm so lucky. People will say, well, aren't you angry that you had cancer? Well, I could have done without it. You know, it's not like I wanted to do it, but I could have done without it. I think I'd still be a good person and I would have been productive. But I took that experience and, made it my life's work to engage the healthcare system in a way to provide better care for the person and for the family. And it's why I use the word person a lot. I've never liked the word patient because it dehumanizes the personal experience that people go through. So I had that cancer experience that then has really resulted in me having a lot of other healthcare problems ever since then, because something that not everybody realizes is that the treatments then cause other problems later in life. It led to a heart issue where I had to have a heart valve replacement. And then it led to another issue where I had to have back surgery, broken vertebra. So, I've had a lot of healthcare issues since then. At the same time, I feel blessed because everything that I have had, I've been able to have addressed, treated, maybe not cured, but at least set it up so that I continue. So this is where I've developed this adage or this approach of look at what you can do. I try to look at what I can do. I can't run 10 miles a day anymore. I can't even run anymore. I walk slow, but I'm happy that I can walk slow. But I miss being able to run. I miss some of those things. And so I like to relive them in my mind or in my stories, but I have to accept the fact that I can't do it. I can walk a half-hour mile, and I have to be happy with that.
Yeah.
So that's what I think that I take from these kind of bad things that happen every day to all of us, and then look at what we can do.
What tremendous strength and courage. Kudos to you, Samira, and thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that, because it's obvious and evident that you've handled those adversities in your life with such grace. And I love what you said, and look at what you can do. I've not heard that framed quite like that before, and I think that's quite powerful, because so many times we want to dwell on what we can't do, and to hear it from you, somebody who has battled through, I really appreciate you sharing. I love that.
Oh, you're very welcome. And I loved your adage about strive for the perfect and accept excellence.
Yeah.
I'm gonna carry that with me.
Right. Well, I can't take credit for it. Like I said, it was pursuit of officiating that taught me that, but it certainly has continued to resonate with me. Well, I know our time is running short. I just have one last question. You kind of already hit on this, but it was with your personal story. And I'd just like to hear from you, especially knowing all that which it is that you've gone through personally, and how it is that you've run an organization that has helped people go through what it is that they're going through. What's your message to someone today who might be watching this now, or when they review on demand, who's going through a painful moment in their life, who might feel like they're at their wits' end? They're hearing what you've said about looking at what you can do, but they're just saying, Samira, I don't know how I can keep going. I feel like I don't have the strength to keep going. What's your message to that person?
Uh, my message to that person is that you're really not alone, that there are resources and there are people and there are programs and there are services to be sure that you're not alone. And nobody gets to where they are by themselves. And nobody needs to try to work their way through a very difficult time, whatever it is, by themselves. And so I would say seek out that resource or that help. There's someone there that is willing to reach out a hand
Mhm.
and to help you move out of the position that you're in.
Yes, so true. None of us can do it alone. That's so good. Well, you've been wonderful. I am so grateful for you. I'll just pause here a second and see if any questions come in. Please feel free, those who are still maybe on with us, to put any questions in the chat function. If we don't see any, Samira, again, you've been great, and I'm so appreciative. And I hope that I see you in person sometime soon. It's long overdue. So um, maybe we can reconvene towards the end of the year and maybe grab lunch or something. That'd be great.
Well, it would be lovely. And I have to tell you, I have enjoyed this time with you so much. And I look forward to carrying forward what I've learned throughout this hour with you.
Thank you so much, and as do I. So we'll close.